Hi, everybody. I am Joni Spencer. I'm the editor-in-chief for the Commercial Baking Media Group, and I'm so excited to have the honor of moderating the one in-person panel. And honestly, I'm just happy to be here. So it's just so great to see people and hug people. So welcome, everybody. And like Kerwin said, we're going to talk about QSR and some of the things that they've been going through over the past 15 months. Food service was hit really hard, and QSR operators were finding themselves really having to be more adaptable and resilient and creative than they've been in any time in history. So I'm just going to give you a quick lay of the land on what's going on in food service before we get started on the panel. So the National Restaurant Association reported that food service saw about 110,000 restaurant closures, either permanently or temporarily during the pandemic. And QSR actually, they suffered some losses during lockdown, but they're coming back. They're doing pretty well now. So they fought really hard. And Todd Hale did a webinar with ABA recently, and he noted that while 2021 sales are projected to be about $133 billion under what they were in 2019, it's still going to be about 11% above last year. So we're going in the right direction. QSR, they're looking at reaching pre-pandemic levels by the end of 2021. So Mintel, they have a 2021 U.S. food service trends report, and they identified that the comeback for limited service restaurants, which includes QSR and fast casual, as one of the quickest returns to pre-pandemic levels. And they are calling the period a re-emergence, and they looked at it from July of last year to the end of 2021. And Mintel said that the QSR is projecting a 5.1 CAGR by 2027. And then this graphic here is noting that over the next 6 years, QSR is going to see some of the biggest growth. By 2027, the numbers are going to be bigger than they were in 2016. So again, we're heading in the right direction. So Mintel is also saying that this growth is being driven in food service. It's being driven a lot by QSR, and it's because of the traits like limited seating, price friendly, takeout friendly, and just a comfortable classic food. So that's really, I don't want you guys to have to sit here and listen to me. So that's all I'm going to have for now. And I want to just get to our panel. So like Kerwin said, I've assembled some partnerships, and we're going to look at 2 partnership sets. And it's one QSR operator paired with his or her bakery supplier to talk about the impact that these partnerships are having on the growth in QSR. And I'm really excited because it's a rare opportunity to see so many points in the supply chain together. So you and the audience have a chance to hear from your customers as well as their customers. And on stage with me, we have Anthony Chicanos, Senior Bakery Scientist for Subway. And then representing his bakery supplier is Hector Morales, and he is the Senior VP for Strategic Partner Development at Aspire Bakeries. And then we have 2 guests joining us virtually, and that is Farrellyn Wolf, and she is CEO of Good Sense, and her bakery supplier is Ethan Hart, President of Custom Foods. So I'm going to take a seat, and we'll get started. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Farrellyn and Ethan, it's really good to see you guys. Thanks so much for dialing in.
Thank you.
I think we're all kind of used to this sort of hybrid, so this is great.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I am going to kick this off, and I'm going to ask you a question, Anthony. So there's a lot of growth happening in QSR. And I know when we talked on the phone, you all are so very grateful for that because Absolutely. It did not come easy. So when you look at the growth that's happening, especially with the size of Subway, what are the challenges that come with managing inventory across multiple locations and franchises? And then how are you working with Aspire Bakeries to kind of overcome those challenges?
Sure. So actually right before the pandemic hit, we were seeing a fair amount of growth. And then when that happened, it was actually a really rough transitional period for us. And so one of the ways we managed that was through really robust shelf life testing with our partners, our bakery partners. And so that kind of allowed us to be very flexible in that quick turnaround time. And it gave us the confidence in order to extend or release product. And then that really open relationship with our supply chain partners and with our bakery partners on inventory levels at the manufacturer level, inventory levels at the DC level, really helped us balance across restaurants who are seeing higher sales versus lower sales so that we could really keep that FIFO method in process. And so it's really been a huge partnership between our supply chain with our bakeries, as well as understanding how we need to place orders and how we need to fill and make sure that even restaurants themselves are not over ordering or keeping low stocks when we're starting to see recovery efforts come in and guests coming into restaurants. Because the last thing we want to see is customers come in, walk out the door just because we don't have sandwiches. So it's been a huge exercise in flexibility, but we could not have pulled this off without a real open line of communication through the whole supply chain.
So Farrellyn, what are you seeing as far as that growth and managing inventory across multiple locations, and how are you leaning on your bakery supplier for that?
You know, similar to Anthony, we've really been blessed. I'll say blessed because our Good Sense restaurants have done really a great job. Our franchisees are really fighting hard for every one of those sales. And the challenge I've had mainly with that is keeping everybody encouraged that if we have little blips here and there, we're doing a really great job collaborating with all of our suppliers, especially Custom Foods on our bread, because that's one of our most important elements of our sandwiches is our soft pillowy bread. Thank you, Custom Foods. But really just making sure that everybody, we use several distribution centers across the country to get our products to our franchise locations. So really working with them and making sure that we communicate practically we do weekly, just to make sure that they have inventory levels sufficient to cover us. And we don't want our franchisees to ever be shorted on a truck or not be able to get their ingredients into the restaurants and into the guests' hands. So I think it's really just back to the communication and just making sure we're all working together and making it happen.
Okay, and then so the next question is for the bakers, and Hector, I'm going to kick this to you. So what technology tools are available for streamlining this ordering process, and are things like predictive analytics coming into play?
Absolutely. So you have to look at technology in two different fronts. There's going to be a storefront, and there's going to be the back end, which is our communication with distributors and our manufacturing process. So starting with manufacturing to distributors, we do have going back to the comment from Anthony earlier on communication. There is a robust amount of information exchange that really started with the pandemic when we realized that we had to be more nimble. We had to be both proactive and reactive at the same time. And beyond the EDI communication and how the order is normally exchanged, we also layered in data that allowed us visibility into inventory levels at DC. So by DC, I mean distributors, of course. And knowing that, we were able to predict, waves of orders in a manner that we had not done before. If I know that our distributors' inventory levels are low, we know a spike in orders is going to come in somewhere around the next 1 or 2 weeks. And we know that that is not driven by demand necessarily, but rather by level of inventory levels. How we react in our manufacturing forecasting to inventory leveling versus demand itself that comes through communication with Anthony on promotional activity is different, right? So there is a lot of planning and a lot of strategy in the sense that we do have products that have longer shelf life and allow us some flexibility, but that only takes you so far. At the store level, there is technology that is helping the process as well. Subway was at the forefront of implementing GS1 technology in a lot of our manufacturing process. So our labels now have GS1 128 barcodes. That barcode carries the lot code, carries the expiration date, and a unique identifier for the SKU that allows us to actually follow the cases of production from the production level through the supply chain into the store until it's actually used at that level. So, using tools like GS1 technology has been important to us, matched by the information exchange I mentioned earlier. So, in all, we've been able to manage through what has been a very unpredictable environment otherwise.
I feel like it's, the past 15 months have kind of prepared you for streamlining processes. I mean, if you can get through the past year and a half, man, you've got it nailed down.
Yeah.
So Ethan, what kind of tools are you guys using to streamline ordering when you're working with GoodSense?
We haven't really seen a lot of different changes in the technology that we're using to take the orders. But we have changed in the respect that we're not so much just taking the orders and filling them now. It's been more of a very open communication channels with GoodSense and all of our customers to make sure that we are staying on top of their needs. We saw a huge shift during all of this where a lot of distribution centers, DCs, were trying to manage their inventories very, very tightly, which caused disruptions on the backside of things for our customers. So, at that point, we made a fervent effort to make sure that we're in constant communication with these customers and providing solutions, taking their word of mouth, what their needs are, instead of relying independently on what the distribution channels are looking at.
Okay. All right, Farrellyn, this one's for you. One thing that I learned from that ABA webinar is that while brick and mortar is seeing the bulk of sales for QSR, e-commerce is where the growth is happening. So can you talk a little bit about how that's impacting operations at the store level, and then how that impacts your needs from your bakery supplier?
Sure. I will tell you when you're working on new things like curbside pickup, updating your online ordering, this kind of situation that came upon us made us get it in gear, and we had those things developed really quick because we had to accommodate for all those things that happened over the last 18 months to make it easier and more convenient for our customer to order and get their food from GoodSense. So with that, again, we're blessed. We're up on in-store sales and on the e-commerce or online ordering and all of these other ways we're now getting food in people's mouths. And with that comes just better sales, more product needs. Again, back to Custom Foods and we talk about it all day on what we're going to be doing in regards to promotions and what's going to hit then and what timing to take into account to make sure we have all the products we need in our distribution centers to get the product to the restaurants. So yeah, I think most of us are hearing this again. It's just really how well we can communicate what we're doing, plenty of time ahead in order to make sure that we are sufficiently covered for our franchise locations. And that's the most important thing for me to make sure I get accomplished.
Right. So Anthony, what are you guys seeing as far as the changes that e-commerce is having?
Yeah, Subway was built on customization, being in front of the sandwich artist, picking out exactly what you want. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges for us in remote order is how do you properly convey exactly what you want on your sandwich when you can't see how many olives you're going to get. If you're an olive guy and you ask for olives, then you want olives. And typically that regular build is not going to be exactly what you want. So in the sandwich category, that's, I think, part of the struggle is how do you build a robust tool that allows your customers to get exactly what you want? I think they're fantastic tools. They're always going to ask you for the add-ons. They're always going to ask you for the plus ones, ask you for the larger size, ask you for the meal. So the size of prize there is huge. But what we weren't expecting was, we don't expect people to take a whole lot of time to get from the restaurant to their sandwich when they're gonna eat it. But now with third-party delivery, that terrifies me from a quality perspective because you're releasing the responsibility of your brand and giving it to someone else to then manage. And so luckily, I think cold sandwiches do extremely well. Hot sandwiches are definitely the things that we need to worry about. And so many packaging innovations have been happening around how do you cater better? How do you handle third-party delivery better? Tamper-proof seals, all of those things that I think were always starting to move forward. And then when the pandemic hit, they just really took off. They got prioritized. If I'm sure later we're just going to talk about how deprioritizing and prioritizing work has happened throughout all of this, but that with delivery has been huge. And then making sure that if you're going to a Subway and they're not out of the bread that you want, making sure that they have that available. So it just goes back to, we don't want our DCs ordering late because they're afraid. We don't want our restaurants ordering late, and we don't want them ordering baking light inventories, because when you're in the restaurant and you smell the Italian urban cheese, it's really easy to trade. I think we always see that trade in person is really easy, but it may not be as easy on remote order. I don't know if I have data to support that, but that would probably just be from my own experience. Trade down or across is a little bit more limited in that aspect.
So, okay, so I have a question. When you talk about the third party delivery options, so pre-pandemic, I feel like the relationship between a food service operator and a third party delivery was a lot different than it is now, because they kind of saved the day almost, enabling consumers to get food delivered that they wouldn't have necessarily done otherwise. I mean, I know personally, I downloaded a lot of delivery apps that I didn't use before. So how do you see the third party apps changing the way you're doing business? Like, is it here to stay? Do you have a different relationship than you did in the beginning?
I think it was pretty clear. I mean, pizza did extremely well in the beginning of the pandemic. Their model is built around delivery, and ours was not. It was built around in-person brick and mortar, as you said. I think we had started before the pandemic to build those relationships. And I think the people who are not me, who are in those contracts, building out what that looks like, is going to be a huge team, because that's exactly it. I don't think it's going away. And it's always going to be the question, does it make more sense to invest in delivery yourself and own it through the whole process, like some of our other competitors in the pizza chains? But I don't know if that's something that Subway would end up doing. But the control is, from a quality perspective, is everything.
Right.
And I think that's what you need to think about is, how does that feel to lose control for a second when your brand is still on all the packaging?
Right, yeah. Okay, so Ethan, this one's for you. And we've talked about this one in the past, in previous conversations. So consumption habits are changing and sandwiches are back in the spotlight. So how is that impacting R&D for you guys at Custom Foods? And what does that R&D process look like in this partnership with Good Sense?
That's a great question. Thank you for the question. I kind of want to talk about it real quick without going down the rabbit hole. Really, the pandemic was kind of a launch pad, for this to happen. Sandwiches are portable. We talked about portability before, Joni, and how important that is, with QSRs, especially through the pandemic. And I think that consumers are now very used to having that portability of an item. Pizzas are very portable. Like Anthony was saying, they did very well with that. They were set up with that. And a lot of sandwich chains are too, especially Good Sense. They were able to pivot and do a lot of things to their. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. It kicked my video off. Apologize for that. But at any rate, Good Sense did a really good job of pivoting some of their solutions to continue to make things more portable to their clients. And also we're seeing that people are more health conscious about their decisions. A sandwich is something that is extremely customizable, very flexible. You can make a lot of choices on it. You can make healthy choices, or you could make not healthy choices. But with that, I think that what we're seeing is the portability and the flexibility of the sandwich and the ability to make health choices and that customized solution. We're seeing a huge influx, in the R&D department. It's 400% up on new project development in comparison to the last 3 years combined. So it's a very busy space in the R&D department, but to compound that, people are looking at keto-friendly options, plant-based proteins, things like that, and inclusions that they want in their bread. And those present their own challenges. These are We're traditionally, a very straight dough, bakery manufacturer here at Custom Foods. And when we start talking about keto-friendly options and plant-based proteins, into the bread and other things that people are looking at, clean label is obviously a very big thing now. It's presenting more and more challenges for R&D, ingredient sourcing, costing on a commercial level, solutions for customers. So it's taking more time, more iterations, constant communication with the customer about what their needs are, what their end result wants to be, the format, the bite, the chew, the taste, the flavor, all of those things. So it kind of, I would say it doesn't backlog R&D, but it definitely presents more of a challenge in that field.
Right. So, Anthony, how are those trends, like the vegan, organic, keto, plant-based, how is that changing how you're working with Hector, and how are you guys ideating on menu development and new product development for your breads?
So I'll go back to that comment I made about prioritizing and deprioritizing. I would say the R&D landscape that we had pre-pandemic was a lot more diverse, and then everything shut down. And then our marketing team really came to us and told us what the plan was coming out of the pandemic. We knew that the size of prize was huge. You had to hit the ground running. And so there was a concerted effort to actually make a huge change to our 2 core footlongs. And honestly, Hector from Aspire, I have another partner out here, RT, out at Lineage. The speed at which we had to move was huge. And so I would say when we focus, our focus is on the core. And right now, I think now we're starting to open up more on what what else can be, that keto, that gluten-free, I don't really see too much around. We've had gluten-free for quite a while. Plant-based proteins is, everyone has been testing it in the major players. But I honestly, right now, it's been a huge focus on the core for us. And we know that if you can win in core, you can get people experimenting on the menu, but you have to drive people into the restaurants for us. And we know that that's going to be the absolute biggest win, is getting people refamiliarized with Subway, being very happy with how that experience goes. And the work that Hector has done has been phenomenal to turn around essentially a decision date in December and make that happen for a launch in April. So we did have some time beforehand to kind of vet it out, but the amount of time that did take to get it to launch is, everything felt short in the pandemic. The time to market, because the size is so big, everything feels shorter. I'm not sure how Farrellyn feels, but everything.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
you had to react.
Yeah.
So Hector, can you talk about that a little bit? That shortened timeline and the crazy speed to market.
I mean, the reality is, timelines were shrunk. I think, going back to the comment from Anthony, the beautiful thing for us, though, is that we had already been moving in the direction on some changes, all the way down to formulation, that were, thankfully somewhat related to the needs of the business in a post-pandemic world. An example is, as you think about, delivery and a bread moving from point A to point B, and the length of time between, the actual baking of the bread, which happens at store level in Subway, to when a consumer is actually going to eat this, maybe 2, 3, 4 hours later, then, that bread needs to hold up a lot different than it did before, right? It needs to hold longer, it needs to hold better to sauces, it needs to toast better. So having a more robust formulation was a big key to being able to deliver on some of the changes in the marketplace. And, again, even before the December to April timeline that Anthony talked about, we had been working in that direction for a long time. In fact, the project had been delayed at some point, but, when the pandemic hits, then we realized that, hey, we were going in the right direction. Let's go back to that idea and bring it to life. So ultimately, in that sense, we were already, working towards a goal, and it fit perfectly to the environment we were faced with.
Okay. So I have another question for you. Obviously QSR has gotten through the pandemic and it's doing really well. And now we have a new challenge. And I kind of saved this question to the end because when we had our call, this dominated. So I wanted to make sure that we give enough time to it. But we've got a little bit of disruption in the supply chain, and it's impacting everybody in this room for various reasons. So can you talk about in what area it's impacting bakery production for QSR the most, and what those challenges look like for you?
So today we're faced with challenges in the supply chain that come in from availability of raw materials to begin with. There's cost and pressure, of course. So if inflation is a factor, and then availability in general is a factor. Even transportation is now also constrained with less drivers, more expensive transportation, expensive fuel. So the pressure comes everywhere. At bakery level, we're also facing challenges with labor that I'm sure everyone's facing and heard about. So even when we do get the raw materials there at the right cost at the right time, then do we have the people to even run this thing to begin with? So ultimately, it is. And I want to add another layer of complexity here, which is how do you predict the unpredictable, right? Because we have all these demand signals coming in. I talked about earlier about a demand signal coming in from lower inventories at distributor level versus a promotional occasion that our customers are bringing to us. How do you discern those two signals and still, are able to produce on time and have enough people at the bakery to be able to run, a production plan the way you need to. So I've outlined the problems and, how do you fix it? Right now, it's really about creativity. So the session earlier, was very, very impactful that way because we're facing problems we did not have before. When you think about forecasting, it used to be that I could use historical data to be able to play an algorithm that would give you some predictability into where we're going. Mm-hmm. Historical data is no good to you anymore. So right, what do you do then? So it really comes to a little bit of gut feeling. We had a great conversation with John this morning where, as we look at promotional activity coming down the pipeline, I'm making some decisions that are saying it's a gut feel that I know this is going to work. So we're going to take a risk and produce at levels that my algorithms don't tell me to do, right? That maybe the historical data going back to 2 to 3 or 4 weeks don't tell me to do, but I know this is coming. I believe in what we're doing. Therefore, we're going to go on home and make sure that people are out there producing at max capacity. Gut feel in that sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, so Duncan was spot on talking about making gut decisions. And that is a little bit outside of the comfort zone in bakery production when it's all about predictability and repeatability. So Ethan, what are you seeing as far as supply chain disruption and how it's impacting bakery production for you and how you serve Good Sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of second everything that Hector has mentioned here. It's at very least very frustrating. There's not one thing that I can think of in the bakery that has been affected in some form or fashion, whether it's, transportation side, ingredient delivery times, ingredient shortages or outages. So it's been very frustrating. And Hector's very right. You have to be very creative on your decision-making processes, on your solution processes, how it's affected Good Sense. And I can remember very clearly, and I think Farrellyn remembers the day and the minute.
You mean the day that you just about gave me a heart attack and I fell out of my
Right. So I think that everybody at BEMA, is probably very aware, there's a national, Vital Wheat gluten shortage. And I remember when I called her and I said, everybody over here is at the bakery is, what are we going to do? And I said, well, the first thing we're going to do is communicate with our customer, what's going on, not alarm them too much because there's solutions for this. But, it's a good communication strategy with Farrellyn and her team on what we're going to do to get past this, through R&D and formulation changes potentially, and, looking for, different ingredient suppliers. There was about probably a 2-week period there where I believe our bakery unit probably called every single supplier in the United States and a lot of worldwide suppliers. And you just kind of have to grind like that, right now. I mean, if you can't stay in the grind and stay on top of it, you're going to fail yourself as a baker. You're going to fail your consumers and your customers. So we've really made a commitment, here at Custom Foods, and it's always been that way, but more so now than ever, that with everything that's going on in the environment, we're not going to be a part of the problem. We are going to be a solution for people. I think that, Hector has that same approach with his customers. So we found workarounds, to these things through formulation changes and temporary suppliers. And there's a little bit of, there's been a little bit of relief, from the FDA and the standpoint on temporary ingredient changes and things like that. So it's been an animal for sure.
Yeah.
We doubled our gluten usage from our old to the new. So that one was a real fun adjustment to start looking at that forecasting for the ingredients. So
Yeah. So who could have ever imagined that we would be using words gluten shortage?
Well, it was the canal, right? And then that was my very first thought when our bakers and our supply chain company called me, and like, it's not even that. It's just there are boats out there that can't come aground and they can't get unloaded when they are aground. So it's reframing what the issues are. I feel like it's trying to understand. And I think we talked about this a little bit when we had our call, it's not even, I think the customers now are even understanding a little bit more of how lean supply chain is on so many things. At the beginning of the pandemic, you started seeing meat shortages. And it wasn't because there wasn't enough animal out there. It was because the supply chain was cut off right in the middle. The packers were shut down, the slicers were shut down. Now you're seeing the costs of used car sales go up because you can't make new cars as with all the chip shortages. So I think Hector put it well before. It was maybe some of our guests and customers are understanding it. You're still seeing that growth. There's still demand for it, but we have to be very creative in how we put that in front of our guests and how we position ourselves when we are talking about that.
When we had our call and we were talking about the chip shortage and kind of making those comparisons with the auto industry and the baking industry, and it's a really interesting perspective that a consumer can understand, like they can make that logical connection. Cars are more expensive, chip shortage, those go together, but it's hard for a consumer to make that connection. Chip shortage, now my sandwich is more expensive. It doesn't really translate. So I'm really interested to hear that perspective from you, Anthony, and from you, Farrellyn. So what's it like for you guys at the store level? And then also, what do you feel like your bakery suppliers and then their equipment and ingredient suppliers, what do they need to understand about your needs at the store level?
For me or for Farrellyn?
I'm going to let Farrellyn answer it first, and then I want to have you weigh in as well.
I might start with something that was just kind of top of mind that actually was resolved yesterday, and it brought it back even more top of mind. If you order from a sandwich shop, a lot of times we sell catering or party trays. Plastics have been an issue on getting just our standard black tray, plastic lid, party tray kind of packaging. That has been a shortage and outage for quite some time, and it's kind of interesting. We have it back now, but just those kinds of disruptions in just the supply chain is very difficult, obviously, to maintain our catering segment of our business. But when we talked about this on our call, one of the things I was reminded is we have equipment suppliers at this BEMA conference, and I wanted to mention something that is so important to me, and I would so much appreciate it from everybody that would play in this part of the role. When we're opening new restaurants for Good Sense, as a franchisor, we support our franchisees in knowing what is our package, what's our spec equipment, what's the timelines, what's it going to take to get open, and we support them in all of that. Well, right now, with ordering just the basic equipment, oven, meat wells, just the standard thing you would imagine in a sub shop concept. What I would most appreciate is really having the transparency, all the information up on the table from my suppliers about what the availability is truly on these elements that we need to be talking to our franchisees about. Because I think everybody understands we need to be a little flexible right now with what we're dealing with. But what our folks don't appreciate is we think we're going to have something in 6 weeks, and kind of like reality is it's really 6 months. Or if it's those kinds of time variances, if I could ask one thing of all of you, if you could help us in our positions understand better truly what are the lead times on things, That would help me do a much better job of not setting the expectation too high for some of our new units opening, or with the suppliers for that matter. But I would just encourage just really good collaboration on helping us make sure we do a great job on communicating all of that through beginning and end.
Mhm.
So that was going to be my big point on this, is just working together and collaborating on making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really more critical than ever to be able to have those conversations across the supply chain, and it's not just from one point to the next. There's more involved now. So what are your thoughts on it, Hector?
So I think you touched on a great point there, and that is communication across supply lines in ways that we had not seen before. I talked earlier about the data we share, but even ingredient suppliers now are engaging more with us in areas that maybe we touched on before, but not at such a short timeline type level. So an example in reformulation would be, folks from Puratos, for example, have been very engaged with us in how do we reformulate, how do we change our formula, when vital gluten becomes short, and how do we look at a version that uses less of this problematic ingredient, and yet deliver on the flavor profile and the sensory experience that we're looking for in this final product. So these things are happening at a speed that is unheard of in times before the pandemic. So having that collaboration is important, and communication and trust. And I think that the word that we haven't touched on is trust. That really allows us to be more nimble. In these times.
So then, Anthony, at the store level, when we're taking that communication from the equipment supplier to the bakery supplier to the store level to the consumer, what are the needs that you're seeing, and what does everybody in the room need to know about? What's the most important?
I kind of had to put my foot in my mouth earlier when we went out there with this new formula. We knew exactly what we were targeting. We nailed the target. And then we go back to them and say, if you want sandwiches, they may not be exactly what we promised you at the beginning, because it's either there's less gluten in there or there's no sandwiches available. And having to take that conversation to the CEO and then also to the franchisees, and they're both operating under the same method, which is we absolutely need to have breads out there in the field. And so having that conversation with them, and I think you have to, because you can't just promise them something and then tell 30,000 franchisees out there that what we promised you is going to have to deliver. And so what Hector said, the speed at which you need to communicate, you can't sit on your hands and try and brainstorm yourself, the collaboration effort that needs to happen. And it has to happen outside of just your organization. You have to pull in your ingredient suppliers at the same time with your manufacturers, because decisions need to be made so quickly in this environment. And so making sure that does happen is crucial to keeping our businesses afloat right now, because you certainly don't want to have your doors closed right now.
Exactly. And I mean, it's got to be your worst nightmare to be a sandwich shop that runs out of sandwiches.
It was certainly a jarring call when I heard we had about a couple days left of production with the amount of gluten we had.
Oh
That
my
was
Yeah, that's scary. So, Ethan, we talked a little bit about this earlier. The ability to pivot is so critical, just like what all four of you are saying, that flexibility is the name of the game. That said, flexibility doesn't always play nice with efficiency. So how do you find that happy medium that best serves Fairland?
There's, sometimes there isn't really a happy medium. I think, Fairland and a lot of our customers right now, they're trying to pivot their operations to adjust the environment, which means that we have to pivot. The big changes that we're seeing is different packaging formats, or taking a current product they have and changing it to a different format or a different solution for their consumers, which means an investment, in equipment and lines and training and things like that. And it's an expensive endeavor, but I mean, as long as we go back to that same thing, and our communication strategy is very, very good with Good Sense, if they're trying to roll out, new flavors or new premium this or new premium that, to be more competitive, in their space, we just have to communicate those the expectations very, very well with one another. Time frames are extended right now also, with the ingredient shortages, equipment shortages, things like that. I mean, it just has to be a constant communication between myself and Fairland or any of our other customers that we have out there that, we want to be there. We want to be the solution. We will be, but let's manage the expectations, going forward and manage the timelines going forward, and to where we don't, cause problems for one another. Fairland did an outstanding job of, bringing forth some new cookie flavors for Good Sense that have been kind of staple around there, I think, for a very, very long time. And they wanted to go to a more gourmet option. And it's not really related to equipment per se, but I mean, going to that gourmet option